Hi, this is Scott Wilkinson, host of Home Theater Geeks. In episode 56, I chat with David Bales about Pioneer's newly announced AV receivers and their tight integration with Apple's iPad and iPhone. Coming up next.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Home Theater Geeks is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Home Theater Geeks with Scott Wilkinson, recorded March 6th, 2011. Episode 56, Pioneering Apple. Hey there, Scott Wilkinson here with UltimateAVMag.com and HomeTheater.com. This week's guest geek is David Bales, Manager of Product Planning at Pioneer for their audio products. Hey, David, welcome to the show.
Hey, Scott. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
I'm certainly glad you're here. Those who are tuned into the live video stream at live.twit.tv or logged into the chat room at irc.twit.tv can post questions for David, and I'll pass on as many as I can. Now, today is quite special, actually, because David is up in San Francisco at a Pioneer press event announcing the latest generation of Pioneer AV receivers and how well integrated they are with Apple products. Why don't you give us the overview, David?
Sure. Thanks, Scott. Yes, we're here in San Francisco. In Apple's backyard, so to speak. And you're right. Over the last 6-7 years, we at Pioneer on the audio side have really tried to make extra efforts to be compatible with this new portable phenomenon known as, the Apple iPod, the iPhone, and now the iPad. This year's 2011 Pioneer line of AV receivers takes it to the next level, really. And while we're iPod, we're iPhone, and now iPad compatible with this line of receivers, we've also incorporated some network functionality that allows the Apple consumer to really go to another level of getting to their iTunes library and sharing it to their home theater system through a Pioneer receiver.
Mm-hmm. Now, I remember I have a Pioneer receiver, actually, with one of the very first ones with an iPod. It's not really, it could be a dock, but it's really just a cable. And that's very convenient. But one of the things that isn't so convenient about it, and I'm sure you've addressed this by now, this is several years old now, is that you have to control the iPod from the receiver. The iPod's display is completely disabled. I hope you've fixed that by now.
That's interesting you bring that up. That's great. We have. And as Apple enthusiasts ourselves, we really realize that it's very difficult to pry that iPhone, iPad nowadays out of our hands. So once connected with a Pioneer receiver, which, by the way, we don't require a dock. We put the cable in the box. You're ready to go from the minute you bring that Pioneer receiver home for audio and video from your iPhone, iPod, iPad. But to your point, we do. We put a button right on the front of the receiver that allows you to say, hey, give control back to the iPad, iPhone. Let me pick my songs or playlist right from the Apple device, then set it down and go on with your listening. You had mentioned that when connected to the receiver, that we lose control of the Apple device, and you're forced kind of into the on-screen display and the remote control that comes with the receiver. And it's funny you mention it, because we really noticed that ourselves. As Apple enthusiasts, it's hard to even pry the device out of our hands sometimes. You're just constantly wanting to play with it and change songs. So we fixed that. There's a button on the front of the receiver. As soon as you're connected, you can control it with our remote on screen, or you can take control back to the Apple device and pick your songs, track, skip, do everything you need to do right from the device. So that's been solved.
Great. I'm really glad to hear that. Now, what about you mentioned earlier integrating with iTunes and sharing your content. What have you got going on in that regard?
Right. Well, as you said, we're here in San Francisco. We're at a really nice hotel, the W, up here in right downtown. We've got our favorite press folks are up here running through demonstrations and presentation right now for 4 new receivers, all of them at some form or another completely compatible with Apple devices in one form or another. Really beginning with an entry-level receiver where, excuse me, Bluetooth ready. So with an accessory device, you can go wireless with your Apple device right into your home theater system. You step up from there, and we include a cable in the box for audio and video control and playback from your Apple device. And then as you move up to the top piece, we have Ethernet capability that's going to allow you to network share your iTunes library to your home theater system. This is called AirPlay, and AirPlay is embedded technology in the AV receiver. So this is extremely exciting because while we've had certain levels of Apple compatibility in the home theater through our receivers, we're really at another level now where you're completely wireless. And as a product planner, I look at it 3 ways: connection, content, and control. You can get one and you don't have the other 2. In this case, we really have taken care of all 3 in that you're wirelessly connected through your home network. You've got all the music content on your iTunes device ready to go through your home theater receiver, and you've got control of all that from your Apple device if you wish, as we discussed earlier. Mm-hmm. So we really feel like this is a real transition time with network capabilities, the huge explosion in iTunes out there, where it's really the #1 music source for many people, if not most these days, at least in some form or another. And then to give them that kind of access and compatibility through a Pioneer receiver is very exciting.
Yeah, it really sounds great. I can't wait to try these things out.
Are you Are you watching the chat by any chance?
I cannot see the chat.
Well, I can read it back to you. One of the questions is, Pioneer showed off a new media server project at CEDIA 2009 called ETAP. What happened to that?
Wow, ETAP. It just didn't quite make the wave, so to speak. It really had the correct approach in that audio and video and all of your media in one place, connectivity to the home theater, and we felt like very good graphic user interface and control. I think a little bit in the price point and technologies that we're talking about here today, where we're seeing AirPlay, DLNA 1.5 technology trickling down to some very aggressive price points, and then in the TV market as well, where we're seeing network product with your Pandoras and your Rhapsodies and all of your other media sources are becoming very standard. What we think now really is that the AV receiver is very well equipped to be that source of entertainment. It's always been where you connect your devices, and now just because they're coming off the internet or being streamed through your home or shared from a NAS device or what have you, the AV receiver might be the appropriate hub for that. The idea behind that technology is still very much in our product planning minds, and I think it dovetails quite well into what we're doing here with our AV receivers, an AirPlay technology that I discussed, as well as DLNA and file sharing, all the services out there. So we directed our attentions a little bit more towards the AV receiver, embedded what we learned with that digital library into the AV receiver category. It doesn't mean that we won't or aren't looking at a separate media device of some sort, but we're going to have to stay on top of the curve here and make sure it's got everything it needs for that next generation of new media.
Right. Now, Reverb Mike followed up on that with a question. Is there any storage in these receivers, like for MP3 files, or do they go out? They don't have any local storage, but they go out and get something on a NAS or another computer connected to the network.
Right. No local storage yet. Never say never. We'll see about that. But you know, there's so many ways now to get that content into the AV receiver via USB. Like I said, every model in our lineup now is Bluetooth compatible. So if it's on that smartphone or on that pad, we're ready to go to share that content.
Mm-hmm.
I think really what we noticed over the last couple of years, and as we continued to try and stay on top of bringing the Apple experience and lifestyle into our world, is that we're covering a lot of, if not most of the bases, by just allowing easy connection, easy content, and easy control of the system through the Apple device.
Mm-hmm.
So for storage in the receiver, obviously that's would be quite a what would we call a chassis change. We'd have to completely redesign the car, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So
a hard disk could fit in there.
Right. And it's not to say we can't do it, we couldn't do it, or that we haven't even prototyped that type of thing. But to bring it to market, not quite ready for prime time.
Sure, of course. Did you I've forgotten if you've mentioned the price points of these new receivers.
I did not, and I'm remiss. Sorry about that. We are starting at with a VSX 521, and all of these models I'm about to mention are on our website ready to go. You can take a look at. We've got videos explaining what we're doing, all the collateral material ready to go. But a VSX 521 starting at $249, fully Bluetooth compatible. All of your Dolby and DTS high definition surround modes. We've included the microphone to room calibrate in that model. The step from there is a VSX 821 at $349. Adds USB input, cable included for your iPhone, and now iPad compatible, which was a little bit tough because that is to charge that iPad. There it goes. Is to charge, and that required a whole new USB device. So we did that, took care of that. So at $349, you're ready to plug your iPad into your AV receiver, get complete audio and video. The step from there is $449, and we go to 7.1 channel VSX 921.
So the previous two are 5.1, correct?
Correct, sorry. And then video scaling and conversion to HDMI with the VSX 921.
Okay, and that's at $450?
450, 449.
Mm-hmm.
And then top of the Pioneer line is a VSX 1021 at $549. And here's where things really get interesting. This is an exciting receiver. At this price point, the feature set is just incredible. With the Ethernet port, AirPlay technology, as I discussed, sharing that iTunes library through your AV receiver, DLNA 1.5, so sharing of other formats through the receiver, through your home network, streaming capability, and then a couple other really cool little things we've added. I'll start with one that is our new iControl AV2 application, all free on in the App Store. You can go to them right now. They're ready to download, and there's demo mode, so you don't need our product yet to be able to check them out. But one of them being iControl AV2 is a replacement of last year's iControl, is ready for the iPad. And it's super cool. It's completely redesigned. It's going to control every aspect of the AV receiver or one of our network-capable Blu-ray players, and with just all kinds of fun features to control your sound, to control your inputs, to manage your AirPlay, to manage your DLNA, or is vTuner built in for internet radio, control your radio stations right from your iPad.
So in other words, the iPad or iPhone or iPod Touch, I guess, becomes a remote control for the receiver and for the entire system, right?
Well, it's going to control our receiver and our Blu-ray player. Network control of other devices, other manufacturers, not yet. You never say never there. But control your AV receiver, absolutely.
Got a bunch of questions in the chat room here. For example, Virgil asks, do the Pioneer AVRs, can the firmware be updated over an Ethernet connection? And I guess that would only apply to the 1021, since that's the only one with an Ethernet connection, right?
Right. And yes, firmware can be upgraded through the Ethernet as well as through our USB port at that price, at that model level.
And do the other ones, so the lower models, have USB? I've forgotten.
Yes. Now, the 821 and 921, 349 and 449 price points have USB input, front panel input.
So you could upgrade the firmware that way with a USB memory stick, or maybe software from a computer connected via USB.
It is possible, yes.
What about the multi-room capabilities of these receivers?
Multi-room for this lineup starts with the 1021. It's a 2-zone receiver, ready for audio and video, composite video, an RCA2 channel. You can control those second zones from our app, our iControl AV2 app, which is one dedicated for the iPhone, another dedicated for the iPad. So, yep, you can go to a second zone at that price point.
So only the 1021 at $549, right?
Right.
Is that second zone HDMI, or in terms of video, or only component or S-video, or how does that work?
No, it's a composite video out for second zone. You have to go. HDMI for zone 2 is a bit of a challenge, actually, because of copy protection, the rest. That's a completely separate video processor you're going to have to put in there to separate the two sources. So it's something we are working on, but it's not as easily done as said. So getting high definition content to the second zone is pretty standard for us at our mid-level Elite. And as far as what we're going to do next year, let's talk again in June.
Yes, because you do have the Elite line coming out in May or June, and certainly I'll be interested to find out about that as well when the time comes. Right.
Well, you can see, with what the technology that you're finding in the 1021 obviously will find its way into Elite, and then some. So,
sure.
I'm itching to talk more about what we're up to, but I got to tell you what's going on with this lineup we're launching here. Again, for the vast majority of consumers out there, when you look at the price points that people spend for an AV receiver, to get this amount of technology is really extraordinary. And with all the buzz going on about the iPad especially, to have full AV capability right out of the box at a $349 price point is actually pretty extraordinary. So
yeah, as a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, that $349 price point and these lower price points that we're really talking about here, you Pioneer, and dealers are all operating, I think, on pretty thin margins, aren't they?
Well, yeah, it is not a whole lot new though in the AV receiver business. Margins start out where they start out. At launch, we hold up. You get into the selling season, and things happen from a promotional standpoint at the retail level, and then we typically have a closeout time. The thing about our business that I think is healthy in that way is that we almost every year have something new and cool out the next year.
Sure.
It's a trick for us to transition smoothly so that inventories, both in our barn as well as at the retail level, transition, and we bring the new product in. And we typically do a pretty good job of that, so that closeout time, you get the latest, greatest receiver from last year at an aggressive price. The margins are thin for everyone. But we're really more than happy to do it in that, we're ready to launch and sell the new stuff.
Sure.
So the business model for the AV receiver category is actually quite healthy. I know everyone's thinking of how the recession hit this category, but I don't understand it. In a way, we played a bit defensively here, but the category is up significantly over the last couple of years, and ours is up double what the industry is.
Wow.
So, yeah. So we know a couple things. We know 3D compatibility and HDMI 1.4a, and then we can't put our finger on it other than this Apple compatibility that we've been working towards over the last 6-7 years. It's gotten to the point where it's just something that once consumers realize we have it, and we have it better than the other guy, which is our job, it's working out for us, and we're selling a lot of receivers. We're quite pleased with the business. And again, that's why we're up here in San Francisco. We're real pleased with Apple's AirPlay technology and being able to embed it in the product and get that iTunes released from your headphones and released from your, from your computer and share that seamlessly in your home theater system. It's a big one.
Sure. What about sharing photos? Can you do that like from iPhoto as well?
For the AV receiver embedded AirPlay, it's music only. From our connection, USB video connection, yes, you can share, set up a photo slideshow with music. And that's pretty standard.
Yeah.
Been doing that for a little while.
Right, exactly. Got a couple questions about the audio outputs of these new amps. The 1021 has multi-room, so I assume that it's got a little multi-room audio as well. Or is that amplified, or is that only line level?
It's line level. Yeah.
So you need an amp in the remote room.
Correct. If you wanted to go the line level. Now, with the 7.1 receiver, we can assign amplification to the second zone and control volume and amplify it and control volume from the main system if you go speaker level out. I'm thinking the question is a pre-out discussion, and yes, you would set it up with a set of powered speakers or an outboard amplifier, basic custom kind of job. Right.
Another question is, do these low-end receivers, and low-end I don't use derogatorily, I hope you understand.
Value added. How's that?
Value added, yes. Inexpensive receivers use, quote, chip amps or discrete transistor outputs. And this gets to a question that I was going to ask you about Class D versus Class AB. So why don't you answer that question first, and then that'll serve as a launching pad for us.
Okay, well, first let's fix the chip thing. The chip amp, no. We're AB, class AB transistor switching amplifiers. We call them direct energy. They're Pioneer through and through. We've had this design for a long, long time. It's a miniaturization kind of a direction in that short signal path. That's the theme of our engineers for amplifier design in the AB, thus the name direct energy. We build them and essentially we had built them in 3 different chassis, value added, and then we have a mid-level chassis, and then we have our upper end chassis. What we're launching now in the Pioneer brand are, regardless of the numbers you may see out there, and we'll post all the different kind of amplifier specifications just to, largely in response to what retailers want to see. But 20 to 20 hertz FTC ratings are about 80 watts by 5, 80 by 7. The 1021, we got a little more juice out of that guy this year, and it's a 90 watter. The numbers that you would typically see at retail are going to be the FTC number with a 1K, and you'll get up to 110, 120 watt by 5 or 7.
Now that's at a single frequency of 1 kilohertz, and you're talking about the range from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, right?
Right, and that's really the way to look at an amplifier's performance, is how it would perform in full bandwidth frequency response 20 to 20. So you'll see that spec on our website always. You'll see it in our owner's manual. But a 1K spec is not a bad one to understand what the amp could do. At a 1K, give it some volume, it's going to move some air. That's not a small amplifier when you think about what amps, had been able to do in the past when 50 watts was big.
Yeah.
So
well,
it's amazing.
Certainly. Sorry, I was going to say certainly. Tube amps are if a tube amp is 50 watts, that's huge. But another related issue there is that these days with speakers having a sensitivity in the 85 to 90 dB per watt range, right. I mean, if you feed that speaker 1 watt, it's going to output 85 or 90 dB, which is too loud for me, that's for sure.
Sure. Yeah.
So, the having a bunch of watts, to me, doesn't, well, there is a reason to have a high wattage output. And you and I were talking about this before the show. Why don't you reiterate what you said to me then?
Power, and again, thinking in terms of 20 to 20, an 80-watt amplifier, a typical, home theater setup of speakers, they're probably rated...
You're in a hotel room and your phone just rang.
It's Crestron.
Oh, it's Crestron. I hope you can call him back. Sorry, go ahead.
No, there's just good old audio. It's not about volume. It's not about 80 watts and how loud will that get. Although we want to make sure it can get loud enough but it's the quality of the sound. I like to think of it in terms of just harnessing electricity to recreate sound. That's the trick. And there's always a potential for a weak link in the amplifier section, the preamp section, the speaker wires. No telling where that problem could be. But the first place you want to make sure the electricity is under control. It's nice and clean. It's amplifying that waveform correctly. The higher the wattage, really the better. In the case of, for our mid-level chassis, for example, we're not really talking about that here at this show. These are our value addeds. But as we go up into the higher wattage range for Pioneer, we go to 110, 20 to 20, and that's a significant boost in power and potential fidelity as you go up in volume. Mm-hmm. One of the analogies I think we were talking about was, it's like a car. There's smaller chassis out there. There's smaller engines out there. There's, 4-cylinder 6 and 8s, and they'll all go 80 miles an hour, 90 miles an hour. Sure. But as, you get into the bigger car, you get into the bigger motors, you get a smoothness, you get a less work to create the same amount of energy. And that's what it's about. So. Right. For most people or many people, an 80-watt Pioneer receiver, as we're launching here, is going to be fine, more than enough. And then there's another level of performance that as you go up, we really, every year we have to decide whether it's kind of, and I'm not taking away any of the value of something other than build quality, but in the business we all call it the bells and whistles. Is it a bell and whistles year, or is it a mechanical year? And what's really fun about this year is I think we got a little bit of both. We got a lot of new cool technology as well as improved amplification and sound quality from a mechanical standpoint, and that's a good thing. We like to see that every year. Unfortunately, that's not always the case.
I always like to think of amplifier power as if you use a little bit, you have a lot, you have 100 watts, say, but you're only using the first 10. The amplifier, as you said, isn't working very hard. It's operating in what we call its linear range. And so there's distortion is going to be lower. The waveform is going to be more accurately represented. And so I agree with you that having more power is generally a good thing, even if you never use it. Right.
Most people listen at fairly moderate levels, but we all do it. You have friends over, you're at a party, and you want to turn it up. You just want to show off sometimes, and and that's one of the things we really want to make sure at Pioneer, and that's just been part of our DNA forever. Is turn it up and make sure it sounds good. There's a certain volume level where the room and the system come together. This goes into room calibration and the MCACC DSP technologies that we're using these days to tame the sound to fit the room.
Right.
But beyond that, just volume, good quality audio, whether it's 2-channel or multi-channel, it's all about how can that thing perform when you really get it going, and you're playing it nice and loud. So
now, your reference to MCACC is a chat room question that I want to get to in just a moment. But first, two other questions that occurred to me, and also in the chat room. Are all the amplification channels in these new value-added receivers the same wattage, or are the surrounds, do they get less?
We're the first guys to do equal power, all 7 channels. And that's the same now. It's a must. If you're in a full-blown 5.1, 7.1 surround system with DTS HD master audio coming from that new Blu-ray disc, you don't know what you're going to get in what channel, and they all have to be prepared to handle anything. So equal power and linear power across those 5 or 7 channels is critical, which
Excellent.
really leads into that Class D discussion you were going to ask about.
Yes, go right ahead.
I got very excited by that technology. Once again, kind of moving me into June 2011 Elite. But aside from we've been doing with our Class D amplifiers on our high end, that's a key question, because equal power at 130, 40, 50 watts that these guys can handle, when you all channel, what we call all channels driven, which is a spec a lot of guys like to look at in the trades more than really in the anywhere else, but it's popping up more and more. How can this receiver handle all 5 or 7 channels when they're all being driven full blast? And that's one of the big benefits of the Class D design for our receivers. They're more linear at all channels driven, and that is, again, just one of the biggest benefits of the Class D amp design that we'll be talking about in this summer.
Right, which are not in these value-added amps.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So are your specs at all channels driven as well as 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz?
We'll start posting those more and more as we get closer. It's an area of discussion we like to talk about on the high end, again, where our Class D amplifiers reside. All channels driven with our AB amplifiers it's key to keep them linear. So the numbers drop significantly when you do drive all channels. So the consumer gets confused. They don't know really what we're looking at. It scares retailers a little bit that consumers aren't going to be excited about 30, 40, 50 watts all channels driven in an AB amp design. So I don't think any of the manufacturers, including us, have really gone down that road. It's not as real world as most as people might think. You're really never going to be driving 100 watts into all 5 channons, although you might. And,
well, we do that in our testing at home theater on receiver reviews. We do test all channels driven,
That's
as
right,
well as 2 channels, and we find in some cases that amp power drops significantly, like majorly,
Absolutely
and in
does.
other cases not, which is kind of surprising that it's not able to be more uniform across different manufacturers.
Right. Well, we have to design these amplifiers to do you almost have to protect the 2 channels to a certain extent. Stereo is the FTC rule. That's what we measure, the left and right. The capability of the center and surrounds to go up to that power level of the front, left, and right is the trick. And different manufacturers approach this differently. For us, we want in all channel driven mode, regardless of what the number may turn out to be, for them to hold up and maintain linearity. That's key for us. So we're not afraid of, okay, we drove the Pioneer multi-channel wide open, and it delivered these numbers, when you compare that to the other guys, I think what you'll find is that their 2 channels will hold up, but their effect channels will fall apart. And I'm not naming everybody. I'm just saying that is somebody. And everybody's got different chassis and different levels, and it varies on where they're going to put the emphasis.
As we've seen in our reviews, absolutely.
Right, you have. And you guys are a key part of what, we realize that you're interested in these specs. Your readers are interested. We've always been interested in it and understood it. It's just it hasn't equated out to the real world and something the consumer has really picked up on. And again, at this level of product, it's a little bit beyond what most consumers are going to be interested in. At the high end level, where our Class Ds now reside, it's a key story, I think. So we'll spend more time on that next year.
Yeah, well, a few months from now, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the FTC rules, and F-Loop in the chat room writes that he still doesn't understand the new FTC rules for power specs on home theater amps and receivers. Can you help him out?
Sure. There are no new rules. The 1974 amplifier rule is pretty much in place. At that time, nobody knew what home theater multi-channel sound was, so the rule really boiled down to its basics is a manufacturer will say how many watts those 2 channels are, give it a number, at what impedance, and what is the THD for that condition.
Total harmonic distortion.
Total harmonic distortion. So we're required to divulge those 3 things. We can say 2020, we can say 1 kilohertz, we can say 6 ohm, just as long as when we put them all together, you get a picture of what the amplifier can do. We always do 2020. It's only been in the last decade or so that 1 kilohertz has picked up, but it's been a spec that's been around forever. And then the only other real amendment to the rule has been more on the retailer side with what they have to divulge. And they really don't have to post anything about THD or ohm load. They can rate the power. They can post the power because it really is up to us, the manufacturer, to give that number, 80 watt, 90 watt, 110 watt, whatever it may be.
Sure.
So as long as we stay within the conditions and give our retailers all that information, it's up to them to pass it on to the consumer if they wish. If they don't, they can just give them the wattage number.
Well, that seems kind of bogus, if you ask me.
well, the consumer can be assured that we're staying within the guidelines of the FTC rule when you're talking about, a lot of retailers now like to say total system power, so they'll add it all up. So
100 watts per channel times 5 is 500 watts.
Right. So that's a very common way of describing, what the capability of that AV receiver may be, and that's pretty accurate. It's fine. I think the consumer gets a pretty good understanding of this one's got more power than that one.
I'd sure rather them understand that if they don't have equal power, for example, as I know Pioneer does advocate, and rightly so, in my opinion. They can't know that just from a single sum of all the power coming out of all the channels.
Yeah, and really the reality of it is it's equal power potential per channel. The left and right stereo channels are going to take, depending on what you're listening to and what mode you're in, 80%, 90%. Then you go into 5-channel stereo, and the whole system's really kicking. So
are any of these receivers THX certified?
No, not in the Pioneer line. We move into Elite for THX certification, both Select 2 Plus as well as Ultra 2 Plus as you go up our line.
Right. Now, you mentioned MCACC, which I wanted to make sure we get to. SoCal Ray asks if there have been any improvements to this algorithm over previous versions. And first of all, I want you to tell me what MCACC stands for, because I can't remember. It's Pioneer's proprietary automatic room correction algorithm, right? It plays a bunch of test tones or test noises in each of the speakers, has a microphone sitting out there, and it then automatically compensates for standing waves and reflections in the room and optimizes the sound of the receiver for that room. What does MCACC stand for?
Well, you hit it. That's the idea. First of all, I have to put my marketing hat on and say that Pioneer was the first manufacturer to put that microphone in the AV receiver box. MCACC originally, I think I was there. It's multi-channel acoustic, the C at the end of acoustic, calibration.
Ah, okay.
Multi-channel acoustic calibration. The philosophy behind our in-house MCACC calibration system is very simple. It is one sweet spot. We think it's, right here.
Right between the eyes.
Right between the eyes. It's all about stereo imaging. It's all about sound levels, distance, time alignment, and just really classic acoustic science. We do not believe in a wide sweet spot. We're not I'll use the terms I hear out there with other systems as fuzzy logic. This is very straightforward. We measure for distance, time, level, and then lately, over the last 4 or 5 years, we've been working on phase. Phase is a problem because as we moved out of the 2-channel world into that 0.1 world of the subwoofer, everything got out of phase. There's filters going on in the receiver, there's filters in the speakers between the crossovers, and then there's filters going off into the subwoofer. And so sound is just really out of phase in that home theater environment. So we addressed that a few years ago. We have a couple levels of phase management in our system. We really are the only out-of-the-box system that really addresses time alignment and what we call 3D calibration, so that the various frequencies as we're working our way through the calibration are all measured in time. So reflections are going to happen in different places depending on the room and the speaker layout. So our system allows you to well, it'll automatically adjust for it, but if you've seen our calibration readout that you can now get on your iPad, you can look and see by frequency or channel where the problems are in the room. Then you can see in time, in milliseconds, where the problems arise. So run the calibration, but adjust the EQ setting to where the time, and that's the trick. So we always run it just to see, and really we're not looking at the sounds. Once we see the room, we adjust the calibration, largely the time. Sorry, I'm lagging a little on you.
Yeah, sorry. I'm afraid the bandwidth in your hotel room might be choking a little bit there.
Yeah, a little bit. Okay, well, calm down here and let it catch up. But that's the gist of it, really.
Understood.
Working on phase, getting things going in time. One sweet spot. If you want to open the sweet spot up to a wider group, there's a bazillion DSP modes that we put in these products. Turn one on and do the sports arena or do what have you. We understand people don't want to do that as much as they used to.
No, I sure don't.
The emphasis is not there anymore. We understand there's 5-channel stereo is a very popular surround format for music. For us, it's that encoded Dolby DTS high definition surround format for Blu-ray that we want the most accuracy. We want to hit everything just right, hit that sweet spot in a multi-channel sound field for a wide variety of room environments, for a wide variety of speaker arrays. I mean, we're having to compensate now for, and I might be the only guy in the office who likes this height channel. I like the height channel. And for me, it's a very cool thing in the video game world, not to change the subject too much. But we got to calibrate for that. and make sure that if you're going to do the height channel, that we know how far away from the speakers are, or you're going to be in a surround back configuration, or you want to be in a front wide. The options in the multi-channel world, AV receiver world, are getting bigger and bigger, and I think better and better. There's so many new formats out there. There's so many different ways that you might want to set up your system, that we give you all kinds of options. You can do front height or front wide, and or back or B speaker, or use your 7-channel surround back amps to drive the second zone. And as we move forward, we're going to give more and more options in that area.
Do any of these new receivers do Dolby Pro Logic 2Z, which gives you the height channels if you want?
I should have given them their due. The height channel is Dolby Pro Logic 2Z. All of them are allowed that, whether in the 7-channel receivers have it built in. The 5.1 channel receivers have the decoders built in, and you can pre-out to an outboard amp to drive the height channel, or power speakers to do it that way.
Do you have also Odyssey DSX, which gives you the choice of width, extra wide speakers, and or extra height speakers?
No.
Why not?
Odyssey. No, I'm going to play nice. MCACC is Pioneer's room calibration technology. We've had it for years. Course, it's been refined.
And of course,
and the
Odyssey
question
does
was, what are
their
the
own
refinements? Yeah, and it's in direct competition with Odyssey. We appreciate what they're trying to do over there, but we don't think that the direction is correct. There's for us, there's one sweet spot. It's not a wide sweet spot philosophy. So you can measure up to 6 different sweet spot zones with our system, and put those into memory. Name them, lounge, Barco lounger, center of the system, what have you. But we're going to measure to one sweet spot.
Which is a philosophical choice, not a technological limitation.
Right.
Huh, that's very interesting, because what they do is, as you mentioned earlier about fuzzy logic, they measure up to, I think, 6 or 8 different locations and then kind of average them all together to get a good sound, presumably, in the entire room. But you're saying that you don't agree with that approach.
We don't think that can be done. There's just not enough, even if there were enough processing power, and I'm not even sure there is, to manage all of those reflections, all of the conditions, from the amplifier to the speaker to the preamp to the room. The acoustics are just far too sophisticated and complicated to manage that many ripples of water and create a smooth frequency response across a wide area. You're going to compensate. You're going to have to give up what we feel the critical sweet spot in the center to do that. So we approach it the other way. We get it as good as technology can today for the one sweet spot, and it's going to sound better for the rest of the room. Sure.
F-Loop asks, does the room correction allow tweaking after calibration? Many systems don't. Once the auto calibration is done, it's done. But you might want to go in and say, tweak the EQ a little bit, or one of the delays or something. Do you allow for after the fact fine tuning?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're going to set it up the way we feel like it should be for a linear sweet spot in the center, but we also understand that people are going to want to do different things. You can adjust any aspect of our room calibration, from the time alignment. You can adjust for standing waves. You can adjust for the phase. You can adjust channel levels. You can adjust the distance, all on the fly from the remote on-screen display. So the answer, that's a great question, and we think that's one of the big differences. It brings me to something I've got to talk about. I know we're about to run out of time. There's within our iControl AV2 application, we have a new technology called Finger EQ, and it literally allows you to draw the EQ curve with your finger on your iPad.
That's cool.
which is just, it's fun, it's cool to look at. But the other is it really just allows you a lot of control over what you might be listening to at the time, and just do a on-the-fly EQ. With all the years I've been with Pioneer, I hear it all the time. What happened to the EQ? Well, we brought it back. It's right there on your iPad, and it's really it's a cool way to just adjust and set things up the way you want them. Another feature I really want to talk about that we're showing this year is dovetails a little bit with Bluetooth compatibility and iTunes, and allowing more than one person to load music up at a time and play through the Bluetooth. We call it Pioneer Air Jam. It's an application that's on our website as of today. You can download it. There's a demo mode that you can play around with, see how it works.
Is this an app as well, or something for a computer?
This is an app. But it works completely through Bluetooth. It allows up to 4 people to Bluetooth connect to our receiver. The 1021 is where this technology starts. And Air Jam, it allows 4 people to enter songs and create a party playlist. So the songs load up on the app. Anyone can override someone else's song if they dare do that.
How does it choose? How does it choose which one it's going to play?
Well, it's going to go in order of when they've been added to the list. But any one person could just add a song and say play now, and the song that's playing will shut down and play the next song. So it is the name of the app is very appropriate. It is Air Jam. It allows people to get in and play music. You can be very civilized about it if you want, and just let people add songs, or you can get in there and get a little rough. I didn't like that, and delete somebody's song and put yours in. You can really play with it. It's a very fun application. We've had a lot of fun with it here in the hotel. It's the first time we've really been able to play with. There you go.
There it is. Wow. It gives a whole new meaning to remote wars, huh?
Yeah. But you can see it's very colorful. It's very fun. And really, everyone's going to be nice. You're going to add your songs, and as the evening goes on, everyone's going to have a chance to play some of their iTunes music through your Bluetooth system through our receiver. Yeah. Another application I've got to dive in, and this isn't an app from iTunes. This is just built into the 1021 receiver. Is what we call AV Navigator. We're showing pictures of the back panels of our high-end AV receivers, and we understand that for the average consumer, this is really very intimidating.
I agree.
Yeah, and we've been trying, but we have to be prepared for any combination of connection. Is it composite? Is it component? Is it S-video in some cases? Is it HDMI? So all of those inputs and outputs are still there. But what this application allows us to do through the two-way network is for the receiver and your computer or an iPad to have a two-way communication. It starts out with a speaker with a system setup. Let me start over a second. There's a ROM disk in the box. Load it on your computer, send it over to your iPad, and then as you're setting up the system, it's going to ask you, what do you have, and then show you how to hook it up. Once you've hooked everything up, you can do an interactive two-way learning session with the receiver, if you push a button on the receiver for phase control, for example, it's going to take you right to that portion in the owner's manual and explain it to you.
Wow, Vice versa, that's cool.
If you go to the owner's manual and you input MCACC, it's going to take you to our sound field technologies right in the owner's manual. So a wire diagram, an easy two-way communication of features, and then a setup navigator that walks you through the initial setup. So
sort of like a wizard.
It's a wizard, and we've played. It's fun. It's really easy to use. Just tell our system what you've got, what you want to do, and we'll walk you through how to set it up, and then what our receiver is doing when you hit various buttons. Tell
me what this particular thing is called again.
AV Navigator.
It sounds wonderful. I can't wait to check it out myself. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. So
you said this hour would go by quick.
I did say that, and I was right, wasn't I? I want to thank you so much for being on the show, David. This has been very informative, and I know a lot of people are going to be looking forward to seeing these new value-added receivers come onto the market. When do you expect that they actually will be available in stores?
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, hey, we're shipping right now. So the 521 and 821 will be there any day. The 921, 1021, probably pulling into Long Beach Harbor right now. They'll unload them. We'll be another week or two back. So
excellent.
Definitely in March.
Excellent. Thank you so much, David. All the
listeners, hit our website. Everything's there. And check out those new apps. Those demos are pretty cool.
I will do. Thank you again.
All right, Scott. Thank you.
Okay, you can obviously reach Pioneer and read all about these new products at pioneerelectronics.com. My online homes are ultimateavmag.com and hometheater.com. You can email me at scott@twit.tv and follow me on Twitter at htgeekscott. Next week, my guest geek is scheduled to be Bob Williams, the Chief Product Architect for Runco, talking about the new D73D 3D projector, which I'll be taking a close look at the following day in their Oregon facility up there near Portland. So I'm really looking forward to that and getting a little bit of a sneak peek before I even get up there with Bob next Monday. So I sure hope you'll join me. Until then, geek out.